this is kind of a thing that I always have to watch out for as a producer, because I tend to I like to add a lot of different elements, right? Like in that one, there's like that sort of lead sample, the dun 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 dun, right? There's that's like going through the whole thing, and then there's charango, which is like a different melody, arpeggiating, and then there's a couple different synth elements. There's bass line, there's a trumpet, and then another synth that's playing the same trumpet melody, and then all the percussion and effects. And there's, if I look back into the project there's probably like 30 tracks going. And so my tendency is to do that, is just to keep adding and adding and adding elements and layers until it's like a wall of sound. And so often at the end of the process, when like all the arrangement's done and even I'm starting the mixing process, I realize, oh, I need to like take out an element or two to just like let it breathe more, because I have to like put myself in the mindset of a dancer or a listener and be like, okay, this is kind of too much, and it's causing a kind of ear fatigue or like stress. Whereas if I take it out and allow space, it's gonna groove harder.
You're listening to the Freio
Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
My name is Ben Harris, and I make music under the name Yemanjo.
And where are you currently located?
I'm in Tulum, Mexico right now. I have a few shows here over the next week, and then I'll go home to Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, which is my base.
Nice. And you are from California, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in the East Bay area in California.
Yeah, let's roll the tape back. Tell me about your early musical endeavors. What first got you sparked into music?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I could go back as far as like being a baby and hearing my dad play the piano at night. He was a classically trained piano player. I think it was definitely middle school. I had this teacher he's kind of like a little bit famous, at least in California, as a music educator, because he's won all these awards, and he finally just retired a year or two ago. His name's Bob Athade, and he was just like a really, really great music teacher and really inspired many generations of kids, including my brother and sister who are older.
And what age were you working with him?
Probably like, 10 is when I started playing the trumpet. So I chose the trumpet. I think because I felt like it would be easy because there were only 3 keys. How wrong I was, but yeah, I started playing the trumpet in 6th grade and was doing jazz band with Mr. Athade and concert band as well. And then later on in high school, I started playing in a symphonic orchestra, so like full, classical string and full orchestra. And yeah, the trumpet is just such a versatile instrument. You can play jazz, you can play classical, you can play. Now I play it with electronic music, so it's been a really good instrument over the years to accompany my evolution.
And for somebody who maybe is thinking like you used to think that, oh, there's only 3 keys, well, it should be easy. What are some of the revelations that like you've discovered, or the nuances that take time to develop?
Yeah, well, with the trumpet, it's all about
instrument.
It's all about the embouchure. It's all about like building the musculature in the lips and around the lips to be able to have the flexibility, right? Because each position on the trumpet, you can play up and down like the full harmonic partials. So it requires a lot of training to get that flexibility to be able to hit the notes that you want, and then if you want to improvise, that's a whole other process of learning music theory and learning chord structure and that. So I personally started like being classically trained, so you'd hear it in my sound if you heard me play. Like I try to have a really like clear classical sound, and then only later is when I started learning more about improvisation, and I did that like not so much coming from a jazz perspective, although I did play jazz growing up, but I fell in love with world music, African music, Latin music. So my improvisational sound is more geared towards that. It sounds more like a salsa trumpet player, you might say, or like Afrobeat, or these kind of things that are more like groove based.
In my head, there's a question, and as a non-trumpet player, when you're talking about the embouchure, I just have to ask. Mm-hmm. And you're hitting, you said you had the full harmonic partials, which is a kind of interesting language. But does that mean that you are controlling like the frequency of the wind coming out of your mouth so that you're able to like hit the harmonics, basically?
Yeah, it's more about the speed of the air.
Interesting.
And so like so if I play like an open C on the trumpet, which is a concert B flat, and then the next, like if I pop up to the next note, it's a G, so it goes up a fifth, right? And then the next one is the C above, so it's a fifth, and then a fourth, and then a third, and then a major second, so that the harmonic series goes up, and it gets in half each partial. It goes up.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. So it's really about the speed of the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also like micro adjustments in the embouchure, in the tense, the tensing of the lip muscles.
Wow, cool stuff. Well, I appreciate you indulging me there for a moment. So when you had some access to some great classically trained musicians, and I think you mentioned earlier that teacher was doing some African travels and was pulling music. Is that right?
This is actually a different teacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
tell me about the next teacher.
Yeah. So different guy at the same school. He actually wasn't ever a teacher of mine, but I met him, through my music teacher, and his name was John White. And he had lived in what used to be called Zaire, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, in I guess it's probably the late 70s or early 80s. And he was a musician. He had fallen in love with the music from there, and he decided to start so in Congo there's a very popular style of music called Congolese rumba, and this was like the Congolese people listening to Cuban music, the Cuban rumba and other styles of Cuban music, and loving it, and like translating that music back into African style. So there's a lot of great groups of Congolese rumba starting from about the 60s through the 70s and 80s. And Mr. White loved this music and wanted to play it, so he started this group of students to play this music. And so that was like, and through him, I sort of discovered a lot of other great African artists, like Omo Sangare from Mali, this group Tenarawen. It's like a desert blues group.
They're awesome.
Yeah. And around the same time, I was also starting to go to this all-ages club in Berkeley called Ashkenaz, which was a place that started, I think, in the 70s. And it started as a place where people would go and do Balkan folk dancing, because the owner just loved Balkan folk dance, and so they do that. And then slowly they started booking more, because the Bay Area is like, there's so much world music from all over. It's a really fertile scene. And so I started going, I volunteered there. I would go see, bands from Africa, reggae, Latin groups, Balkan groups, like stuff from all over the world. And so that place was like, I sort of count that as like being really influential for me in the evolution of my tastes. I also used to go a lot to a record store called Amoeba Records that was in Berkeley and also San Francisco. And, like now having traveled all over the world and like been to record stores all over the world, I realized like how lucky I was to have that place, because it's just an absolute mecca of like, it's huge, and it's like the staff is so knowledgeable, and I got exposed to a lot of music through that place growing up.
Cool. Now, I've never been into Amoeba Records, but is it just like the granularity, like you could go country by country or style by style, or like nuances within the genres?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's organized by genre, but also for like in the world music section, it's organized by country. And there's like staff picks, like when there's new stuff, like the staff listens and picks stuff, and they're always really, really good at recommending good stuff. And yeah, I miss that, like I feel like I was kind of the last generation to grow up still going to record stores. And
I went to Sam Goody, so
yeah. Music online is still amazing, but it doesn't give you quite the same feeling when you like discover some dusty record in a bin that you never knew existed, and it's amazing. And
yeah, there's something about the records though that still seem to stick around. Like obviously Sam Goody, all the CDs stores, those are gone, but the record stores, they're still there in various cities, and they do have like a maybe not the popularity that they used to have, but there is still a foundational demand. So that's cool that there is still, because there's something unique about picking up the record and seeing the album cover and getting the feel and look through different whatever pages and see sometimes the vinyl is cool, So
yeah. No, yeah, it's definitely, you see now with in the age of records, long playing records, like the album became the thing. Like that was the thing that you made, was the album, and it was like the art and the liner notes and the whole album hopefully was cohesive as a work of art. Now that we don't have that, and most of our listening is like playlist based, it doesn't seem like a lot of people people still make albums, but it's really all about like having that one hit single or those couple hit singles that get on the playlists. So like that sort of approach of like making an album as a cohesive unit is sort of like lost.
Yeah. It is almost like a presentation a holistic presentation, like as if you're at a performance. You know, it is intended to be consumed in one sitting in order, not like I remember when Shuffle came out and I was just like, it was like sacrilegious to me. It's like this song should not be shuffled with that song on the same album. Like there was an order for a reason, like it flows. But of course, you know, you had to embrace the new technologies. So given that you've been around music for so long, what are some of the biggest changes or in your mind that you've benefited from or get to take advantage of on the technological front?
Yeah, well, I mean, one that comes to mind is just the ease of creating and producing and recording music, which, you know, it definitely wasn't around when I was growing up. But now, you know, I'm able to produce and record music while I'm traveling anywhere in the world. And like, you know, just the microphones and the plugins that you can make anything sound studio quality, basically. I mean, it's not to say that studios aren't useful, but yeah, it's become easier and easier to make music that sounds really good, thanks to the technology.
Yeah. And so when you're traveling, you're obviously traveling a lot. How do you incorporate recording while embracing all these, you know, various adventures that you're on?
Yeah, well, actually, it's kind of the most exciting thing for me is like to meet other musicians while I'm on the road and record with them. I've been doing that quite a lot in the last year. Like in August, I played a festival in Germany, and I met some musicians after that festival, and just sort of spontaneously decided to record one of them. And it looks a lot of different ways. Like sometimes I'll create like a base of a track and then have a specific musician in mind and send it to him or her, and then they sing or play or whatever they do and send it back to me. In this case, though, in Germany, I didn't have anything prepared. So we just kind of jammed and just, you know, I just like created something really, really basic for him to play over. And, you know, he just created all this material. He was playing the ngoni. It's like a African harp. And so from that session, I ended up creating a track. So yeah, it, like coming from a background as a musician and playing in bands and orchestras and stuff, sometimes like the production and DJ game is like kind of lonely, you know? It's like, you're all alone sitting in front of a computer for hours and hours, and you miss that human connection. And so this is, to me, like working with musicians, even if we're not in the same room, you know, even if they're halfway across the world and I never meet that. Like I've been working with this singer from Mali. I've done 3 tracks with her now and never met her, like she's in Bamako, you know, like, but it's just so satisfying to like have that connection and like these ideas and this energy coming from another person. It just like it makes the finished product so much more alive.
And when you are collaborating remotely, are you sending stems or are you sending the whole project file? How do you think about it?
Yeah, I usually end up sending the whole project file in whatever form it's in. It's usually like unmixed and pretty rudimentary. I try to just like leave room for the musician or the singer or whatever to flow, and then end up, you know, cutting and editing and trimming things.
Tell me about a turning point in your career, like a major inflection point and maybe a decision, fork in the road.
The thing that comes to mind is just the point where I finally like sat down to learn production. So this project Yemanjo kind of started in more like 2013, 2014, when I had just moved to New York, and I had just had a extended trip in Colombia, and in Colombia I was exposed to the medicine of ayahuasca and the music of the ayahuasca ceremony, and that had a profound influence on me. And so I started this project basically writing original medicine songs and then working with other producers, because I wasn't producing at that point, to create this fusion of like medicine music with electronic music. So if you listen, I don't know if you've listened to like my first two albums. The first one's called Medicina, and the second one's called Pachamama. And so that really has this influence of this medicine music, ceremonial medicine music. So I was doing that. That was like a big part of my life in New York. And then I moved away from New York in 2015. I started going to Guatemala, Lake Atitlan, which is where I'm based now. And I started DJing. And then in 2017, I was working at a friend's yoga hotel in Mexico, doing massage. I'm also a massage therapist. And that was when I finally sat down and was like, okay, I'm going to learn Ableton finally, because I'm tired of like I said, I love collaborating with other people, but I also knew that if I wanted to be in a creative flow all the time, that I couldn't rely on other people's timing, because all these other musicians they have their own projects and they have their own priorities. And I also I wanted to develop my own sound as a producer. So it took me just like living alone in Mexico with nothing to do for a while for me to actually like sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna learn this. And so
nice.
I was pretty much mostly self-taught, aside from like sitting in sessions with other producers and getting tips and things like that. There's a lot that you can learn on YouTube, it turns out. And yeah, I started making edits, which are, an edit is like a remix, but instead of with a remix, you have all the stems, you have like all the individual tracks that you can manipulate. An edit is just, you start with a mastered track.
Okay. Oh, that's great distinction. I've never known that distinction. That's good.
Yeah. So it was a really good way for me to learn, because it sort of takes away the need,
quantity of tracks too.
Right. Yeah. It takes away the mixing. Well, not all of it, but some of the mixing puzzle. And it, when you start with a mastered track, you have a structure already. You have like a beginning, middle, and end of the song, and all you have to do is add elements to it. So I started editing some classic African tracks that I love, and these are great to edit with, because most of the time they don't have a lot of low end, so you can add the low end with the kick and the bass and everything, add some percussion, do whatever, and it's just a really sort of quick and easy way to learn about beat making.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how you're getting into the slicing it up and like adding effects and things like that.
Mm.
Cool. Well, there's a bunch to unpack from that fork in the road, which seemed to stem from that Colombia experience, the ayahuasca. So when you were making, out of curiosity, when you're making medicine music, as you call it, how do you get into, how do you create? Are you creating while, I'll say, under, the influence of the drug, or are you able to spiritually enter that realm and create from there? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, no. No, so I don't tend to write while I'm in ceremony, but the experience and the path of walking with this medicine definitely, I could say, opens up a lot of creativity. And it opens up creativity in all kinds of ways for all kinds of people, whether you're like a visual artist or an entrepreneur or whatever, it has a way of just like widening your creative horizons and just inspiring you to step more fully into whatever your path is. So me as a musician, I was really inspired both by the music and how the music affected me, and how I think I always knew that music could be used for healing, because I'd experienced that in my life, but the experience of the music in the ceremony, and this music that the frequencies are tuned specifically for healing, that was something that was new to me. And so that's kind of what I wanted to bring into to meet electronic music and see what could happen with that.
Well, I appreciate you explaining that. And it seems like the amount of meshing of cultures and different approaches from music has been a foundational element, even from maybe your education, where your teacher found one culture remixing another culture and then brought it back to a third culture to create it. And it's pretty cool seeing how you're able to incorporate those sounds into your project. So with that in mind, I would love to transition to a few of your tracks and kind of unpack maybe how some of the layers or textures, where you see them coming from, and some of the instruments that you're using. Yeah. So, Kashama, we'll start there. So that's one has a lot of cool textures and rhythms. And I'm curious, first of all, what instruments are those, and how did you come to create that?
Okay, yeah, now I'm going to have to think of the name of this instrument. So this is one of these tracks that a lot of times I'll start with just a sample of a melodic or stringed instrument. I love the sound of a lot of these ethnic stringed instruments. So this one started with a sample of, it's an Indian stringed instrument. It's not a sitar. I can't remember exactly what the name is right now. But
could be sarod?
I don't think it's Sarod. I think
Okay.
yeah.
It has like a pitch bend in it, which is nice
Uh-huh.
in your sample that you've chosen.
Yeah. So it's like
Cool.
it's kind of like a some kind of like slide guitar, like Indian slide guitar. And so I started with that, and I really liked the way that kind of sounded and moved. And so I just kind of I built the beat around that, and I have some tabla and I think some dole, like mid-range percussion in there, and then like some synth and bass line that really drives it. So yeah, that one is just kind of like built around this sample and playing around with that. And there's also, I think, a ney flute in there, which is like a Persian flute that kind of comes in and supports the melody.
And are you playing that on keyboard, or are you finding samples?
Yeah, no, this one was almost all sample based.
When your mind is in creative mode and you're making a song like that and thinking about samples and sounds to bring in, it sounds like you're pulling from the entire world, and therefore maybe the possibilities are overwhelming. How do you start to filter using your mind and the sounds, sonic textures that you're looking for? How do you start to hone in on a particular sample when you're pulling from such a wide variety?
The nice thing about Ableton is you can work in session view, right? So session view is where the tracks are vertical, and it's really great for coming up with grooves, because you can just like make loops and play around and stop and start clips, and so often if I have like a sample pack, for example, and there's like a bunch of different 4-bar loops or whatever, I'll like create a little groove, put all those samples in, and like play them each individually and start to combine them, or choose one as the bass and then choose another one for a bridge, or create a new sample that's a fusion of two of them, anything like that. And just through kind of a process of playing around and listening, I come to what feels like the right choice, and that can always change. It can start that way and then change, or I can like make the whole track and then decide that no, I don't like that sample anymore, and I'm going to switch it out for something else. But yeah, that's kind of the one of the cool innovations of Ableton, is that it has this view where you can just play around with loops and create grooves that way.
And so you think that, or in your mind or in your workflow, session view is just maybe faster to kind of iterate through possibilities and like combine things in unexpected ways? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for me, it's like a starting place. And like I know other producers that create almost exclusively in session view and just basically like record live what they do in session view and then go back and edit a little bit, and then that's their track. But yeah, for me, it's like it's a place to experiment and create grooves, and then usually I go into arrangement view to arrange and finesse the rest of it.
Well, if you were to generalize your creative process, if you're sitting down and you're not collaborating with somebody in the same room with you, and you're at a blank slate or blank Ableton project, what do you generally start with? How do you put the first paint on the canvas?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's like that, like the Kashama track that we were talking about, like where I'll listen, I'll feel like I want to create something with kind of an Indian flavor or kind of a Middle Eastern flavor, or maybe I just heard someone playing oud on the street in Turkey or wherever I am, and like want to create something with oud, and so I'll, have a folder of some samples and listen through and see what inspires, and maybe start with that. Or else, like, sometimes I want to, start with more of a beat, like start with percussion, and then see what comes out of that. Or sometimes I have a melody in my head. I want to like find the best instrument to create that melody. A set way that I start. Like I just try to remain open to inspiration in all forms.
That's great. That's great. And when you, in those instances where you start with rhythm, are you tapping things out? Do you have a drum set? Are you recording audio samples of yourself, or are you pulling again from sample libraries? Or how do you?
Yeah, so sample libraries usually, in terms of like, I really like hand percussion. So, but for as far as like kicks and snares and hi-hats and that stuff, I create that through using drum racks, and a plugin called Kick 2 is a plugin I use for my kicks, where you can create kick samples with really a lot of precision. But yeah, in terms of like the mid percussion, that's usually samples, loops that I use.
A few other of your tracks, Macondo is one that's a collaboration, and that's a more recent track. How did that one start and ultimately come to be?
Yeah, so that one, it's with my friend Jay Poole, who actually lives here in Tulum as well. That one, we had already done a collaboration together, another track called Puerta del Sol that came out the year before. And I wanted to do another one with him. He's a great producer, and he's also a guitar player. And we just have a really nice flow together. And that one, I was in Tulum at the time. This is last February, and I was at a place called Treehouse and heard a track that someone else was playing there that kind of inspired a melody. And I wanted it to be, because the last one that we created was also, it was like a trumpet and guitar feature track. And I wanted this one to be like that, but like even more up tempo and more like fanfare type trumpet. And so I had this melody in my head, and I knew how I wanted the drop to go, and I knew how I wanted the guitar groove to be. So I brought the idea to him, and we basically created the whole thing in like one half-day session.
Wow.
With the guitar and trumpets and everything, and yeah, it just kind of like it flowed really, really easily.
Sounds nice that it came out in a way that you intended it to.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a clear vision from the start. A few other tracks that I'd love to talk about briefly. Na Procura, if I'm saying that correctly. If I'm not, please correct me.
Na Procura.
Na Procura.
Better. Procura, yeah.
Procura.
Yeah.
All right. So that one seems to have kind of caught fire on Spotify at least, and seems to have found a lot of people that are resonating with this music. So I'm curious, in your mind, or how that came to be, and then maybe some of the elements that you think may have contributed to that.
Yeah, so that one I created. This was like right in the middle of the pandemic. I was living in basically under house arrest, like a lot of people, in my house in Guatemala, but that track actually, the melody and some of the lyrics of it had the year before, like almost a year before, I woke up in the middle of the night with this melody in my head and this lyric. So I made a voice note, and then didn't do anything with it for a year. And then I was creating a track. This is right before the pandemic. I started to create something with that guitar melody. And I was like, oh, maybe these lyrics could work with that. And so I recorded them. I was living with my ex-girlfriend at the time, she plays charango and sings as well. And so I recorded her singing and playing charango. And yeah, I think there's something about the vocal hook that's really groovy. Like people like a good simple vocal hook like that, and it's just repetitive enough that it kind of sticks in your head. And there's really nice elements to it. There's the trumpet melody, the charango, the vocals. It's got a really warm bass line. The vocals, it just has a really hypnotizing quality to it, I feel. And it's not, it's not that fast. It's 105, but it's got this really nice momentum to it.
And I like the adjective you chose, hypnotizing quality to it. That's good. Couldn't come up with that myself, but it's a very apt description.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about the forward momentum and creating that forward momentum, how are you blending the rhythm with the vocals and making sure that things are moving forward in a progressive manner?
This is kind of a thing that I always have to watch out for as a producer, because I tend to I like to add a lot of different elements, right? In that one, there's that sort of lead sample, the dun 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 dun, right? There's that's going through the whole thing, and then there's charango, which is a different melody, arpeggiating, and then there's a couple different synth elements. There's bass line, there's a trumpet, and then another synth that's playing the same trumpet melody, and then all the percussion and effects. And there's, if I look back into the project there's probably 30 tracks going, and so my tendency is to do that, is just to keep adding and adding and adding elements and layers until it's like a wall of sound. And so often at the end of the process, when all the arrangements done and even I'm starting the mixing process, I realize, oh, I need to take out an element or two to just let it breathe more, because I have to put myself in the mindset of a dancer or a listener and be okay, this is kind of too much, and it's causing a kind of ear fatigue or stress. Whereas if I take it out and allow space, it's gonna groove harder.
Yeah, that's cool. So you actually mentally put yourself into somebody else's shoes, and like a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, because when as a producer, when we're like listening to something over and over again in the process of making it, things tend to get kind of boring after a while. So when things get boring, my tendency is to be like, okay, I want to add another layer, I want to add another something to make it interesting again. But if you put yourself in the mindset of the dancer who's hearing it for the first time, like this is groove based music. Like you want to just like be able to sit in the pocket, you know, for a couple minutes, and then in comes the hi-hat or in comes the shaker or whatever, and that's all you need to do to like jumpstart it to
Elevate
to
it.
something more elevated. You know, you don't need to add 3 or 4 elements, like just one, or take out something, you know, take out the high percussion and just like let the bass line come through or whatever. So again, yeah, it's something that I constantly need to remind myself to do, is just like do less.
There's one other song, and then I got a couple more questions for you. So Kaniva.
Kaniba.
So tell me about that one, and what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah. So this one is one of the collaborations with the singer from Mali that I mentioned. Her name is Mariam Kone. And she originally came to my attention when I was making an EP for a label called Cosmic Awakenings, and I had made a track with some other musicians in Mexico, but it was a very like Mali, West African kind of flavored track, and it had all these African instruments in it, and I was like, I really want a singer from Mali to sing on this, and I didn't know her at the time. I didn't really have any connections to any singers in Mali, but I reached out to a few friends in Europe, one of whom connected me to a guitar player that they knew who had toured in Mali, and he connected me to her. And she's an amazing singer. She sings, you know, traditional music from her country. So she sang on that, and she didn't just like send me one track. She sent me this whole, it was like 8 different tracks of her singing lead and then response, this like chorus vocal. It was all her, and it was incredible. And so after that first collaboration, I was like, okay, I know I want to work with her again, because it just turned out so great. So this one, Kaniba, was one that I started. So I had this other secret weapon musician who's this guy named Don Keller, who's a guitarist that I used to play in a band with in Seattle. And he's the same. Like I whatever I send him, he sends me back like 6 tracks of lead and solo and harmony and, you know, all this different stuff to play with. And so yeah, the guitar, it's a very guitar driven track. He recorded acoustic guitar and lead, and then these like he's really a specialist in this kind of African style polyrhythmic interlocking guitar stuff. And so he did that, and then I sent that to Mariam, and she did her magic on it.
And so you got those two people together virtually, and but did you have a foundation before you got them on it?
Yeah. So I built just
Yeah.
like a groove, with like a couple of breaks and intro and outro, and
Nice.
then just kind of let them go wild.
Yeah, and now I assume that you're not sending them like 100-track song. Like you've got to keep it kind of concise enough to where people can write on top of your work. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So like I said, I did the bass. I sent that to Don. He had a guitar. Then I put that in and tried to like leave room for the vocal, and then sent it to her.
Cool.
So usually always like whatever the musician sends back to me, I'm making some choices about what to keep and what to not use.
Ultimately, when the song's done, the other musicians might not know how their part is going to be placed. They might have thought it belonged here, but you moved it over here and you changed this and edited that. So are you communicating ahead of time that there's going to be a bunch of changes, or like is that just kind of a given with musicians, like you're going to be creative?
Yeah, I feel like they know it's kind of a given, and I mean especially someone like Don, he's always giving me more than I could possibly use, and that's just
He
sort
gave
of
you
like
3 tracks,
right, and
Okay.
that's just sort of like built into
the workflow.
the workflow. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, what advice would you give to a young musician starting out today?
When I started to learn production, I was really, because I'd played in bands and I'd had releases in the past. I sort of had this expectation of myself that I wanted to be able to like release stuff right away. So that's kind of what I did. Like as soon as I had whatever these edits finished, I was like, okay, I'm releasing them. Whereas now if I go back and listen to those edits and like hear how I was mixing back then, I'm like, I should have waited, like and like learned a little bit more about mixing, and maybe like had a session with someone who's a really good mixer to like tell me some things about mixing. So I guess the advice would be just to like allow the learning process to take as long as it's going to take, and not be too eager to like release things to the world. Like it's okay. Like it's not. I don't want to say that I regret doing that, because it's kind of fun to like listen back and like hear your evolution over the years. But you also want to like, when you have a release, like make sure that it's the best it can be, and have a good legacy that way.
Yeah, well said. I think there's a quote that popped into my head, and I think it was maybe Jack Dorsey who started Twitter, maybe it was somebody else, but the quote was roughly, if you're not embarrassed by the version 1 or your early release, then you've launched too late. So like you better be embarrassed, because like, and at this point, of course, you're going to know things that you didn't know back then. But would you have gotten here if you were still working on that first track?
Right. Well, yeah, that's the other extreme,
important.
is like you can't be too precious and too meticulous and too perfectionist, because then you'll never release anything. So yeah, that's always you can get stuck at any part in the process. Like you can get stuck in the beginning, or in the arranging, or in the mixing. Like there's always more mixing you can do. But at a certain point, you have to just say like, okay, this is done.
Nice.
You know?
And when do you know a song is done?
Sometimes I have to just like leave it alone for a while, like not listen to it for a week or two and then come back to it and, you know, listen to it again and feel like it sounds done then or not. Like maybe something's grabbing my attention too much and I need to bring it down or whatever. Because when you're in the mixing session and you're like zoomed in really hard on like one thing or particular elements, the low end or the high end or the vocals or whatever, and you work on that for a long time, then you just have to like go back to the beginning and listen to the whole thing as a whole and like figure out if it, you know, feel it, like listen to it and feel if it grooves and if it hangs together and if it's cohesive. And listen to it on a lot of different systems too. That's an important thing. Like listen to it in the car, listen to it on headphones, listen to it on a cell phone, you know, like, because that's how a lot of people listen to music these days, just like on a cell phone.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And like, is the bass coming through on the cell phone? Like, are there enough mids and highs in the bass that you can hear the bass line on the cell phone or on the computer speakers? And then of course, like listen to it this is dance music. So like, is it hitting well on a system with a sub? And I'm getting faster at like getting the mix right on the first or second try now. Like it used to take a lot more like trial and error. But it's a question, you know, it's like getting used to working with your monitors in your studio or headphones or whatever it is you mix on. Like after a while you get to know like what the targets are.
Outside of music, what are you into?
Well, I'm a massage therapist, so I'm into that, and I really you know, when I'm traveling and doing music, I don't get to do it much. I really only do it now when I'm back home in Guatemala. But it's so, well, it's different and it isn't, because like I view music as a healing modality too. But the massage is like, it's such a different experience, like to be able to like put your hands on someone's body and like have this really one-on-one experience with people. So for me, it's like, it's such a great balance between being out there performing and being very like type A and outgoing with people, and then like coming back to my home and inviting people into my home for a massage session. It's very, I just think it's good for my system to be able to like slow down and really be present with someone like that.
That seems like just such a contrast from being, you know, on stage with lots of people, and then obviously now you're just with one person going very slow, and yeah, definitely a big contrast there.
Yeah, I'm all about the contrasts.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book, quote, or message?
One of my favorite books. It's hard to choose one in particular.
If you got like a 2 or 3, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Michael Chabon, who's he's from Berkeley. He won the Pulitzer Prize for a book called The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. And I mean, that book is incredible. It's about a kid in New York who his cousin from Czech Republic comes escaping the Nazis in the 40s and comes to live with him in New York, and they start a company making comic books, and they create all of these comic book superheroes, and it's like just their journey over the years, achieving success with that. And yeah, it's just a really imaginative story, and he he's just like, his vocabulary is so incredible, and like the way he creates his characters are very real, and it's this amazing combination of like really funny and also really sad and poignant. And again, it's contrast. Like I love books that can like make you laugh one minute and then make you cry the next minute, you know. So yeah, he's really good.
All right, so for anybody out there who doesn't already know your music and know you, what are the best links and platforms that people can connect with you on? Yeah,
so for all new releases and also like DJ sets, SoundCloud is the best. So that's soundcloud.com/Yemanjo. Spotify is also good for new releases. Just Yemanjo on Spotify. And as far as like people who want to buy my music, the best way is my Bandcamp. So that's yemanjo.bandcamp.com. Bandcamp just is the best deal in terms of the percentage that the artist gets out of those. So for DJs and people that want to buy my music, I recommend Bandcamp.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share today?
I guess just that I'm some things that I'm excited about coming out in the next year. This year, I'm really excited about some releases that I have coming out with a label called Cafe de Anatolia. They're really a great sort of deep house, organic, tribal house label. And I have a bunch of new releases coming out with them. We're going to be releasing them sort of one by one over the next 6 months or so. And they also have a really great YouTube channel where they publish mixtapes and DJ sets and also live video. So I just recorded this live video of my set with some guest musicians at a festival over the winter solstice in Guatemala at this venue called Eagle's Nest, which is really, really beautiful venue on a mountain overlooking Lake Atitlan and the volcanoes. And so I was actually just working on the audio from that, mastering the audio. And so, yeah, that's going to be like, it's really exciting for me because it's really high quality video showing, you know, what I do live with some really talented guest musicians. And so that will be, I'm not sure the exact release date on that, but it'll be in the next couple of months on the Cafe de Anatolia YouTube channel.
Ben, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you sharing some of your techniques and strategies and in session view in particular, and then like pulling from musicians and samples from across the world and meshing all those cultures. And you're not doing it from one place, which I appreciate. You know, you're actually going and embracing and recording local musicians as well, and kind of connecting the world through music as I believe that music has the power to do. So thank you for your time today, and really appreciate your music.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's really like, it's nice to just like say these things out loud for the first time. It's like, you always learn a lot from being interviewed.
Appreciate you. That's it.
Cool, man. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.